I'm mirrored too. It's weird. I hear a little bit of echo. Am I echoing also? Let me, if I put headphones on, let me see if it fixes it. Okay, did that help at all? Okay, good. You're still echoing a little bit, yeah. Now you're mute. Yeah, I can't hear you at all. No, I still get a little bit. Not too bad. I can still hear it, but it's very faint. Yeah, it's worse now. Oops. Okay, now I mirrored it and now I look normal, so I'll go with that.
Oh gosh, make sure you hit the like. Okay, I'll start again because I forgot to turn on my microphone. Thank you so much, Tim Harris, for notifying me of that. I do apologize for that, but yeah, um, today is going to be a very special stream. So make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the subscribe button, do all the good YouTube stuff because I have in with me to discuss a very important and special case, and that is the Ashley Benefield case. And Andrea Burkhart is here with me to discuss that particular case. Andrea, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for joining me. I meant to say sorry. How are you doing today?
My pleasure. Always a pleasure to be back here, Doc. I'm
Oh,
doing great. I'm having a wonderful summer. I've been having way too much fun. And so you've been my motivation to get back into the studio and get back to work. So thank you, and thank you on behalf of everybody who wants to see me more of me on YouTube.
I don't want to take. Wow, I'm the credit. Okay, I'll take that credit. I'll take it. I'll take it. Thank you so much for that compliment. I really look. The more of you on YouTube, the better. I mean, it's not like we're having Elaine Bredoff on Twitter because if there's two Elaines or all those ones, that's when we gotta fear. But like the more of you on YouTube, the better because your Karen Reed coverage was elite, like legit elite, because we got way more than not gonna say bargain for, but we just got way more than just a lawyer's opinion. But you also gave us a lot of insight into what happens with the police force, etc. So it was really, it was really valuable hearing your input on that. So um, yeah, so if you're gonna be more on YouTube, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I'll pat myself on the back. Thank you, Caleb. Thank you, Heinz. So sorry, I mean, that got my name mixed up. Thank you, Heinz, for doing such a great job. I guess. But yeah, so we're here to discuss the Ashley Benefield uh trial. How acquainted are you with that particular with the case?
Sure. Well, so I'll tell you straight up, I found this case extremely difficult to watch from the outset, from the opening statements. I just felt my stomach drop that this was not going to be an enjoyable one at all. It was going to be a very tough case. And the reason why I had that reaction in particular at that point in time is
Mm.
because I saw it immediately cast as a character battle. It was basically going to be who's a good guy, who's a bad guy, and who's going to basically be able to more successfully smear really
Right.
the other side. So as a result of that, I didn't stream this trial. I watched it pretty intermittently, so I don't have all of the details down, nearly to the extent that I would for a trial, but I watched, every witness from beginning to end, took all of my notes. For people who watch my channel, I'm sorry, my notes are a little bit legendary. I didn't do a recap for this case. I just, I followed a lot of the recaps. I watched a lot of what Pete Tragos on Lawyer had to say about the case, and just generally kind of, tried to keep abreast of what was happening, but only specifically watched a few small, portions of the case, the ones that I thought were most important, like obviously her testimony and things like that.
Okay, perfect. In that case, it's a great moment to do a little bit of plugging because you can get acquainted with the case. I have made this for anyone who is very interested in learning more about this case and getting acquainted with this case. Let me just share with you guys. And this is well, I call it the Heinz report. But but basically, it details all you need to know about the case. And it's gonna get updated once the sentencing is almost done. But once the sentencing is done, it should all be up, and then you can find out about the case. So yeah. So what did you make of?
And your report too was very helpful in terms of like breaking down who all of the witnesses were, what the key points were. It was a fantastic resource. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. for saying those kind words. I always, I mean, I'm black, I'm not white, but I'll be blushing right now because 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 of all the kind words you always have to share with me. So I will share this in the chat for you guys to have access. Sorry, for you guys to access. Sorry. Let me see. Let me see if that works out. Did that? Nope, nope. Okay, so I sent it to the wrong to the wrong browser. 1 second. Sorry. I get like this, Andrea. Sometimes I'm a bit of a boomer, so I'm a bit of a if
It's often a learning experience on the stream. I have discovered myself, we were chatting right before we came on about during the Carrot Reed trial when I had tech issues and my camera basically just like blew up in the middle of the live stream. And you know, we just do what we have to do. You adjust. You figure out how to get through it. So.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, make sure you check the chats now. So the report should be in there. So we're gonna. Okay, so now that I've posted that and pinned it up or all up there for you guys to see, I want to start with the first most important question. What do you make of Ashley Benefield? Do you think that the jury arrived at the correct decision, or do you think that this was a miscarriage for her?
I think this is a really tough question because there's definitely a lot of nuance to this situation. The way that I saw the situation was that Ashley Benefield did not in many ways come across as particularly likable or particularly sympathetic. I think to a lot of people, she came across as probably not very truthful.
Mm.
I certainly got hints of that myself with not everything, but certainly some of the information that came out about things like the reports that she had previously made, the accusations, particularly the child abuse accusations that she had made against Doug. Seems like there were some issues with a lot of those kinds of things.
Mm.
The problem, though, is that multiple things can be true at the same time, even if they're not very comfortable at coexisting. And from what I saw from the evidence that emerged, it did emerge to me pretty crystal clear that the pattern here between these two people was a fairly classic abuse dynamic, and that Doug Benefield was the abuser in that situation. So, did the jury reach the right outcome? That's a really difficult decision to make because first off, it appears to me that it was a compromise verdict. If nothing else, the jury had initially reported that they were going to hang, and then came back like an hour later or something like that with the conviction on manslaughter.
Oh.
So just procedurally, it looks like a process where there was a negotiation and a compromise that was reached. And so in that sense, I think it's on the one hand, it's kind of hard to criticize it. On the other hand, like, should you even be deciding cases like that? Anyway, the reality is they're allowed to do that. And so in that sense, it does seem like a situation where some pretty, substantial differences I would expect between guilty of murder and not guilty of anything at all had to be able to come together and find something everybody could live with. For me personally, is that how I would have voted? Probably not. Probably not. I probably would have been on the acquittal side. But at the same time, I can see why, looking at the sequence of events, the series of decisions that were made, and all the things that kind of go along with that, particularly in the context of self-defense, where the context is really critical, and the nature of the reaction is really critical. I can see an argument that this was disproportionate use of force, and so that self-defense isn't appropriate in that situation. I think bottom line, the best answer I can give you, Doc,
Oh,
is that
God.
this is a tough one.
Oh, Thank you for that. Oh gosh. Apparently there is no sound of flip neck. Oh gosh. Oh wow. I do apologize for that, guys. Oh wow. I do apologize. Uh oh
Oh
gosh.
gosh.
Let me
Let me
see if
see
it
if it
adds
adds
you.
you.
Okay,
Okay,
should be
should be
fine
fine
now.
now. I
Can
do
everybody hear me
apologize,
okay
guys.
now?
Yeah. Yeah. I do apologize, guys. I do apologize. I did not know that. Oh wow. I um. No, 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 no. I do apologize. I have been so sorry. The chat is right to be inflamed with me. They have been inflamed with me now. I
Uh-oh.
get it. I get it. I get it. Oh gosh. Yeah, I'm so sorry, Emmy. Thank you so much, Phoebe, for and every one of you guys for Roy, Michelle. Look, guys, Andrea, I'm
Well,
so sorry.
I can recap that.
No, no, oh, but it's so. Oh gosh,
I can
I'm
do it
sorry.
again.
I'm sorry for all of that. I'm sorry for all of that. It's my first time trying multi-streaming because it's streaming to two channels, so it's a new complete. Yeah, but like it should be. It's fine now. Yeah, let's go again. I do appreciate you for
That's
understanding.
It's no worries. Like I said, things happen. So you had asked me basically just my kind of 10,000-foot view. What's my take on this case and this defendant? And so what I was saying was that I think the big problem she had coming into the case was that she came in not particularly sympathetic and not necessarily very likable. I think there's a lot of suspicion of her in general just because of how this case has been cast. She's cast as, by the prosecutor as somebody who's fabricating, somebody who's seeking, some ulterior gain to herself through all of this. And unfortunately, I think there is a tendency, there is some corroboration of that from my perspective anyway, some indications that perhaps she's not been completely honest throughout this process. Some of that I think is understandable. Things like, telling people different things when she's in the presence of Doug versus when she's not in the presence of Doug. If you are in an abusive situation, that's fairly predictable and understandable that there's a kind of placating that goes on. That's not abnormal at all. But there are other things like some of the accusations that she had made against him that just were fairly problematic. The challenge I had with this case, though, is because multiple things can be true at the same time. She can be unlikable, she can exaggerate, she can fabricate things, and she can also be a victim of a domestic abuser. And the problem is that the way that the evidence came out in this case, it did seem to me to look like a pretty classic domestic violence dynamic between these people. And in that dynamic, Doug was clearly, to my perspective, the abuser in that situation. So on the question of did the jury reach the right verdict here, it's such a tough call, because these are cases and so many moving pieces to them. I can think that she's a victim of domestic violence and perhaps still take issue with, for example, the proportionateness of the force that she used. Did she need to shoot him in this situation? And so I think that is where it looks to me like this was a compromise verdict. Obviously, she was charged with second-degree murder. The conviction was for manslaughter. There was a process where the jury had initially said they were going to hang, but then were sent back and reached the verdict for manslaughter shortly after that. So it does just procedurally look like a situation where there's pretty far disagreement between the sides, but ultimately they were able to come together on this resolution that everybody was ultimately able to live with. Is that the best way for juries to make decisions? That's a whole debatable thing, in and of itself. But the reality is they are allowed to do that. It seems like they did do that in this case, and so in many respects, I think that's kind of hard to argue with.
Right. And also it must it's also important to
It's also remember to hear that this is a self-defense pleading that she made. So it wasn't necessarily a domestic violence kind of finding that the jury had to kind of find. And as you said, it was predicated primarily on whether the force was, whether she really did, whether she really did need to actually go ahead and killed Doug Benefield in the way that she did. Now, now there is another case that I brought to your attention. It happened in a completely different country, but it's similar to this. It was in Mexico, like a rape trial, and it was similar circumstances, but she killed the perpetrator by choking the guy off the neck, with the neck. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison because it was specifically regarding self-defense. So how does the legal system now handle and juggle domestic violence and self-defense, or even, and we were going to stand your ground, because I feel like that's a bit of a different concept in regards to what we're talking about in context, but in regards to self-defense and you know, and domestic violence, how does the legal system kind of try to reconcile both concepts?
Yeah, so domestic violence tends to get introduced in these types of situations to explain the perception of the threat by the person, the defendant, the accused in this situation. This particular case, I didn't really consider this a classic battered women syndrome kind of case. So in those cases, what I am used to seeing is I'm used to seeing a situation where it's really not disputed that there is no imminent threat of violence at all. You're talking about a situation where, like, say a man is abusing his wife, has been doing it for years. It's escalated. He's asleep in bed, and she sneaks up and, you know, whacks him with a you know with a frying pan or something, kills him, and is then prosecuted for it. And so those are situations where that's what I would consider kind of the classic battered wife defense, because there's no clear imminent threat. And so the need is to educate the jury on how domestic violence works and why a person who is, you know, trapped in this situation and has been sort of trained, you know, to expect, to respond in certain ways, and so forth, why that person can have a heightened sense of threat from an abuser because of the dynamics of that relationship, the instability, the unpredictability, the eggshells, just all of the things that kind of go along with that process, as well as there's often a cycle of escalation. You know, it's depicted in a sort of circular fashion where you have the honeymoon stage, everything is fine. You're being love bombed. You know, they're doing things like marrying you in 13 days and investing millions of dollars in a ballet company for you. You know, and everything, you know, seems to be fantastic. But then things get bad, and you get into an uglier stage that can culminate in violence. And then there's, you know, a period of rebuilding after that takes you right back into that honeymoon phase. And so somebody who has been through this cycle many times with somebody in this relationship, they're going to be able to recognize the signs of when are we in a shift from things being good to things being dangerous. And that's often what juries need to be educated about in these situations. Why would somebody think that their sleeping husband in the bed is dangerous at that point in time? Well, because they have been through this enough to recognize, oh, he went to sleep drunk, and when he wakes up, he's going to be like this, or he said something like this before he fell asleep that let me know, you know, he was angry and that there was high risk, you know, when he was going to wake up. It's about just establishing familiarity with that pattern and what it's like to live under a dynamic like that. So that's sort of the typical relationship between, like, why domestic violence gets brought up in these types of situations with relationships like this.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for that thorough explanation. So, in regards to stand your ground, then,
Mhm.
what was the applicability of that? Actually, before I even go into that, you did just
Mhm.
make a point that just came back into my mind now. What do you make? Do you think that the defense, Neil Taylor, do you think that he done a good job presenting and educating the jury about
Mhm.
why Ashley had to take the measures that she did on that day?
Um, well, I have sort of mixed feelings about this as well. One of the other challenges I had with being able to watch this case, besides just how it was, pitched as a character
Mm.
battle between people, I hated all the lawyers. I really did. I didn't like any of them, and I I think
Yeah.
my main praise for Mr. Taylor was I thought he did a very good job of putting together the case. Getting the right people to come in and testify, the right kinds of expertise to come in and explain how this could have
Mm.
happened, how this is consistent with her theory, and stuff like that. I don't want to fault him for not convincing the jury, 100% of just his perspective on how the case should have gone. It's just
Mm.
too high a bar, and like I said, these are just such complicated cases that you don't really know what factor is going to be dispositive for one juror versus another juror. So it's not a situation where you can just strategize like what's going to convince everybody. You got to do the best you can and just hope that you can get enough of them. But I did think it was very important. For example, he brought on the expert to talk about the dynamics, of domestic violence, how that fit into this situation. Without that information, I think it's very realistic to expect that jurors who aren't familiar with it, who haven't gone through it, haven't seen somebody that they know go through it, haven't learned about it through their own, work or education or something like that, they're going to see a situation where an unarmed man is shot and killed by a woman. So it's very, very important to put that in context.
Right. Yes, and that is especially with cases like this, because that is especially with DVs, not as straightforward as rape.
Mhm.
Grape for YouTube purposes. But even with grape, it's still not straightforward because sometimes the evidence could be lacking. But
Mhm.
again, when it comes to like self-defense, and it seems like the system, or at least to me, like the legal system does not. Would you agree with me if I say that the legal system maybe has not caught up yet with how to prosecute cases like this? If it was to be actually, let me ask it like this: Are you familiar with reactive abuse?
Yes.
Uh, uh, so, how do you think that would work in this particular case with Ashley Benefield? Do you think that she
Mhm.
has more of a case for reactive abuse than self-defense, for example? And can the legal system even accommodate such a defense?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And so reactive abuse is this idea that the person who is not the primary abuser in the relationship will nevertheless either adopt abusive tactics of the primary abuser, or just reach a point, kind of a breaking point where there's a lashing out, a kind of reassertion of the self and boundaries and things along those lines. We saw a lot about reactive abuse in the Depp versus Heard case because that was part of the question. When you can see behaviors that appear to be abusive on both sides, which we did. Quite frankly, we did see ugly text messages from Johnny and some stonewalling and stuff like that.
Mm.
But again, it's because these situations are complex and they have to be placed in context. And so, if you didn't understand that Amber Heard was consistently trying to beat him up, that's why he would leave the conversation. It makes you understand why he would react in that situation. So from the legal standpoint, the reactive abuse, it's not going to be a defense, because what is really criminalized is just the conduct, not the motivation for it. So it's got to be fit within a framework of some type of legal excuse or legal justification for the act. Some kind of, well, duress is not usually a defense to a homicide crime, but self-defense, for example, insanity, just things that would be classic legal defenses to a criminal charge. And that's where reactive abuse then typically gets shoehorned into a self-defense type of dynamic through this battered spouse type of defense.
Yeah, I had to ask that question because that popped up in my head numerous times when I was watching through this her testimony and through this whole trial, because I was because from what she was describing, and I can imagine it being terrifying from the onset, because she described that Doug was beating up the dog and was shooting up the ceiling and doing all of those behaviors. I can see how that would terrify someone, that on the final day when you are with them, and let's say that she then goes into the story where he goes into a fighting pose or something like that. I can see how in some realm, when you've been abused before in the past, that that could trigger you, and that could send you off into a frenzy where you might need to actually defend yourself and feel like danger. You would think that your danger is that you're in danger. Sorry, that's what I'm saying. That you believe that you're in danger. But that psychology report that was due to come out on the 30th of September, according to the prosecution, has taken me aback a little bit, because this is where I kind of lost my her credibility kind of when that piece of evidence came into light, because who knows what Doug Benefield may have been suffering, as well as her even. So what the prosecution was trying to bring in, enlighten us a bit more, because I'll be honest, I was watching through that and I was a bit stumped, like, what is the importance of this particular report? And so I didn't really know what it might be. So can you
so it wasn't 100% clear to me exactly what the situation was, but it looked like a situation where clearly there's this very contested child custody dispute going on. There's lots of accusations going back and forth. And so in a high conflict dissolution like this, especially with children involved, it's very common to get experts involved in what's essentially like a custody evaluation situation. And so, yes, they'll bring in experts to talk to the children, talk to the parents, try to do some type of investigation to evaluate, are there threats to the children? What are the nature of the threats to the children? This was a situation where, just to kind of give you my read on it, I did get the impression that Ashley had made false accusations against Doug in the course of this custody dispute. Just some of the accusations that were made did not, come across as very credible. Clearly, there had been law enforcement investigation of some of these things as well that didn't go anywhere, was left unfounded, and there. Like that in and of itself, okay, yes, police can get it wrong, experts can get it wrong, all of that type of thing. But there was no real follow-up, to show, okay, well, what did they get wrong then? Like, what's the critical piece of evidence that the child was abused that justified you making this accusation in the first place? Like, put up or shut up kind of thing. So, So it looked like a situation where the court is, the family court is suspicious of false accusations. CPS is involved. There's just, all of this chaos that needs to be sorted through to figure out, are the children more likely to be harmed by, some kind of physical abuse by the father, or are they more likely to be harmed by an emotional abuse by the mother? And alienation of a child from an otherwise capable parent, yeah, that is child abuse. Very well established that children develop best with the presence and support of both parents in their lives. So those are the types of questions that the family court is having to juggle with. And because of that context, it kind of, yeah, I mean, I understand why the prosecution is going down this road, because I don't know what's in the report, but I can see a situation where, they're saying it's not good for Ashley. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that really clearly. If she's accusing him of doing things that there's no evidence that he did, she's the one who's going to come out looking bad in that particular report.
Right, absolutely. And before we let before we go on to the next point I was gonna make, I'm kind of in a frenzy at the moment, so I'm gonna take a breather, because I was meant to make a point, then I just said all of that. But I'm gonna take a breather and check on how everyone is, because the stream did start off with a few technicals, so I'm just gonna check everyone. Is it working fine on your end? I'm scared to ask that question. And like, could you imagine if there was no sound for the again? But yeah, like, just to check in on everyone, see how you're doing. I am going to add into it's a lot of popping in our mic. Okay, let me try, and it's probably just the volume level. I'll just fix that right now. Yeah, it's probably just the volume level. But yeah, like, thank you everyone that are here tuning into this chat where we are discussing, it's Verdict Talk. We are discussing the Ashley Benefield verdict and how the jury may have gone to that verdict. Andrea Burkhart is a legal criminal defense attorney. Damn. Nearly forgot that for a second. Criminal defense attorney who works in the state of Washington, and has got loads and loads of trial experience. So I'm gonna do my best to ask her the hard questions. I mean, she's like Neo. She sees it coming. She's gonna be like, or do you prefer Trini? Did you prefer Trini? Should I call you Trini instead of Neo?
I'm fine with Neo, but just never forget, I'll make him miss, but I'll also make him pay.
Oh, good. Okay, so Big Cackly went, and I don't know why that happens. Have you, by the way, your mic choice, is this your main mic that you normally use?
This is my main mic.
Okay, it's probably just my end then. I unfortunately can't help. I think it's my sound card then. So that is a diagnostic. That is something I'm going to have to check the diagnostics on. That's the one. All right, use it properly. But yeah, no. So unfortunately, if it does to cackle a bit more, I do apologize. I hope it will fix itself. But yeah. But I also hope that you guys are enjoying the stream. If you are enjoying the stream and you do have some kind of, and you are taking some kind of value from the stream, do consider sending us a super chat. You can do that on the Heinz channel, where I am monetized, because on the second channel it's not we're not really there yet, but we will be, because that court is jumping, is spicy, is saucy, and it delivers. But yeah, let's go back into that question. So what I was gonna say in regards to the psychology report was in regards to Doug Benefield, because I don't know why. Maybe it's the pictures. He strikes me as a crazy guy. He does. He strikes me as not crazy as in the life of the party kind of crazy, them cool kind of crazy, but something is psychologically wrong. So it would, I would have loved to have understood whether that report would have came back with some kind of finding of a psychological problem with Doug. And because we never really got to know what was in the report, maybe for hearsay reasons, don't know, but because we don't know what was in the report, we can only speculate. So let's say that Doug did have a mental illness or mental deficiency, one way or the other, right? And in this relationship, and I have a couple of reasons why I might think this. The fact that he said he had a nervous breakdown, I would have loved to explore more into that nervous breakdown, because that is a lot of stress to even pick up a dog and punch in a nervous breakdown, that reaction and all that. So let's say, for example, I'm going to ask you like this. So let's say, for example, that the report came out and it was detailed in the report that Doug may have had, I don't know, maybe schizophrenia, which could explain the fighter pose he just randomly went into, causing her to, take the actions that she did. How important or how pivotal would that report have been? Because of course, the prosecution would have had to turn it over to the defense. And if that was detailed for the defense, how pivotal would that have been in changing the outcome of this case?
Um,
Sorry, it's very loaded. I know it was a very loaded question.
No, it's okay. It's a tough question because on the one hand, obviously there are millions of people who live with mental illness who manage it and don't pose threats to people. On the other hand, it is not uncommon at all to see situations where people who are in mental health crisis become extremely dangerous, and often their nearest and dearest are the ones who are the target of that. We just saw that in the Chad Dorman case over in Ohio. We're seeing it right now back here in Idaho. There's this case, Jeremy Best. These are both situations where it seemed like there was pretty clear evidence of severe mental decompensation leading up to the crime. In Jeremy Best's case, it's to me, it's just this horrifying, tragic case. The man is found naked in the middle of the day, like in a grocery store. The police pick him up, take him to the hospital for mental treatment. They find he doesn't qualify to be committed. So they release him, and that night he murders his pregnant wife and unborn child. So it's a very tough balancing act when you're talking about mental illness, because on the one hand, you do not want to stigmatize people who aren't presenting a risk. And on the other hand, there clearly are situations where that was at issue, and had it been recognized, had it been caught, or something like that, you might not be dealing with the tragic consequences that we're now dealing with. So the question of how that would land with the jury, I think it would just depend on what's kind of the totality from this report. So first off, yes, the report is almost certainly excluded on hearsay grounds, as well as potentially medical privacy. From a self-defense, from a defense standpoint, Doug's mental health diagnosis or situation, that is only going to be admissible in court if she knew about it. And the reason why is because it would go to her perception of the risk from him. If she knew, oh, he's been diagnosed as this, and he's in this type of cycle or something like that, that's then information that goes to her particular mental state. But if she doesn't know, then it isn't something that she can rely on or that could affect her decision making. She can still talk about his behavior and about the patterns and the dynamics and so forth that she was a party to. But if there wasn't a label put on that, that affected her thinking, then it isn't going to be admissible in the criminal trial. And that's the same thing that often comes up. Like, you'll see cases where somebody is alleging self-defense, and the victim or the person who has been killed in that particular situation turns out perhaps they're a violent criminal. They have a long record of getting into fights or, armed robbing people or, just whatever. But if the person who is being charged, the defendant in the case, didn't know about any of that, then none of it's going to be relevant. And the reason why is because the courts don't want people deciding the cases based on labels like that, based on who do we think is the white hat person and who do we think is the black hat person. And that's a real common tension that you have, especially in these types of cases. I think we saw it set up like that so clearly in the opening statements, that both sides were saying, this is the white hat person, this is the black hat person, and we're going to ask you to decide the case based on that. The reality is typically far, 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 far more nuanced than that. But part of the challenge is, I think a lot of jurors do want to come to that white hat, black hat kind of conclusion because it's very comforting to them. If they feel very firmly that she's the bad guy, then they don't lose a night's sleep over sending her to prison over what happened. If they have some doubt about that and they think like, well, she's a good guy that just, had to make difficult choices or maybe made some mistakes or something like that, then it's going to be much harder for you to reconcile that in your own mind with the decision that you have to make on the verdict. So the white hat, black hat is the easy way out. And to the extent that a mental health diagnosis can make it, knee-jerk easier for a juror to decide, oh, white hat, this is where the white hat goes, this is where the black hat goes, then yeah, it has the potential to have an enormous effect on the jury. But that's, kind of ironically, almost exactly the reason why they don't allow it in, because it's not it's extremely prejudicial, and it doesn't necessarily tell you, anything that's going to be material to the crime. It doesn't make it more or less likely that he committed the crime. It's only relevant if it goes to her mental state and what she understood and perceived.
Right. Oh, and that's a great point that you brought up in regards to a mental state, because there was psychological analysis done within the case, I think from forensic psychologists. I'm not too sure if there were if it was a psychological evaluation that was supposed to appear in the report or for the particular case, but nothing came back from it. So we know that Ashley doesn't have any kind of disorders. We know that Ashley doesn't have any kind of impairments or anything like that. But I still can't shake the feeling that she may have PTSD or something like that. That may have at least tried to make me understand why she would just... Because if she's making up that he went into a fire pose, that's not really the best defense. I'm not gonna lie. If you're gonna say that to the jury, I mean, you can expect a guilty verdict all day long. I mean, he went through that. Wait, he went to fire pose, that's why you done it? But if he was corroborated by a PTSD, do you think that may have tipped the scales a little bit? Do you think that may have made a difference? If she did make that a controversy, or if it was found that she did have PTSD and she didn't decide to contest and say that she was mentally insane rather than she felt justified, because of stand your ground. How do you think that would have played out?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. So I don't know that in and of itself, the PTSD diagnosis is going to get you to an insanity defense. Insanity is I don't know, I'm not 100% sure that Florida follows the common law standard, but I will assume that it does. The common law standard for insanity is not knowing the difference between right and wrong. And so it tends to, because it's this legal idea and not really a mental health idea, you can't really point to any condition and say, well, that one's, going to satisfy it. You can have somebody who is floridly psychotic and is still found to, understand the difference between right and wrong. They just don't perceive the, reality of the situation the way that somebody who's not psychotic at that time might be.
Right.
And you know, lots of cases like this. I had a case of my own along these lines, like one of the most insane, you know, colloquially speaking, just you know, crazy people that I've ever, you know, ever seen or read about. You know, nevertheless found to be sane for legal purposes, because he clearly understood his view was that the devil was compelling him to commit the crime, and the reasoning is, well, you know, if you mentally have things in a framework of the devil is on this side and God is on this side, you understand then that one of those is right, one of those is wrong, and
I
that's
like
just
to
kind of
see.
how it goes. So insanity ends up being this extremely limited defense that almost never applies in most circumstances. Now, there's a little bit of a middle ground that you can often get to, which is what I would call diminished capacity, is what we call it in Washington. And this is the idea that because of some type of mental disease or mental defect or something along those lines, you are unable to form the mental state required to commit the crime. And so the idea would be, you're not because of PTSD. You are not able to accurately perceive and process the events as they're unfolding in a way that lets you calculate a measured reaction to it, you know, that you intend to do and you act accordingly. I think in this situation, that's going to be a pretty tough sell too, because it seems pretty clear. Yeah, she knew what she was doing. She knew that she was pointing the gun at him and that she meant to pull the trigger. The issue here really was fairly straightforward, that from her perspective, she felt that she had to do it, that it was necessary under those circumstances. So I think the question, if she did suffer from something like that, I don't see anything here that would independently establish that as a legal defense. I think the question would be, really, does that aid in understanding how she was processing what was occurring, which I think it potentially could. Something like PTSD, you know, could definitely affect your perception, your processing of what's happening. And then just to the extent, does it add sympathy to you? You know, again, one of her problems here, she did come across as fairly unsympathetic. A lot of, you know, criticism of her reactions, her demeanor, her dress, like everything. And there's a lot to not like about stuff like that. You know, it seems to, just gonna put it out there, seems to happen a lot with women, right? They gotta be exactly the way you want them to be at the defense table, or you know, they might be guilty of something. They might be a bad woman. But the reality is just that is the reality. You know, people
Yeah.
are looking and making those types of judgments. And so could it add to the sympathy scale? You know, potentially, if there was something like that was available to work with.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for all of that. For all of that explanation. Thank you, everyone that's also here. I just want to check in on you guys. Make sure you hit the like button. We are 50 minutes into the stream now, so I think it's important to actually disclaim that I have blundered this process of trying to transition and do multi-stream, because the stream that we are on, the stream that we are on, I made that by accident. Like, so a new key was made. So if you guys click the notification bell, my boomer ways said, you know, it doesn't matter now, but share this stream is basically what I'm trying to say. Share this one. If you're watching this and you know, you can see our faces, our beautiful, beautiful panted up faces. Share the stream and, you know, share with everyone high and wide. We are discussing the Ashley Benefield verdict, and there's a lot more questions I have for you, Andrea, in regards to Ashley Benefield, because she engaged in parental alienation, and the prosecution kind of ran with that kind of I don't know what you call it, that kind of attack. I don't want to say attack because that doesn't sound right, but I'm kind of using attack defense. You know, it's easy to know to say defense, but what do you normally say for prosecution? Is it attack? Like, strategy. Like they went with this
Mhm.
strategy of basically just of saying that it was the parental alienation, sorry, it was the custody battle, sorry, the custody battle
Mhm.
between Doug and Ashley, that was the main motivation for her to have shot him.
Mhm.
What did you make of the prosecution's approach to the case?
Yeah, well, I think you just hit it right there. Like the reason they brought this up at all was to prove motive, right? And they have to. I mean, motive is not an element of the crime, right? It's not something that they're required to prove, but it is something that juries tend to find very helpful. Like especially if it's a shooting that's out of the blue. Like obviously there's been conflict in this relationship before, but nothing anywhere near this level. People are naturally going to want to understand, why would she do this? Why now? And so that was their theory behind it, was that she wanted sole custody of the child. It wasn't going well for her in the family court process, so she decided to take matters into her own hands, and basically
Mm.
get the result that she wanted that way. I thought it was a viable theory from a prosecution standpoint. It does intuitively make some sense. It does appear to be somewhat substantiated by how the child custody process was going. She did appear to be alienating the child from the father, pretty much
He
pretty much
didn't
from the
even know that a
outset.
child existed. He didn't even know that he
He didn't even
existed.
know
Yeah.
she had been born for however many weeks it was. So to that extent, yeah, there's some kind of play. She gave them that. That's a little bit of an own goal. I think the challenge is, again, just trying to get back into her shoes and her perception about why she did that.
Mm.
And that's where the defense, I think, has a hard job of again just being able to pitch the domestic violence in the context and in the way that people could understand why there appear to be so many inconsistencies here. Why is she, on the one hand, expressing that she is terrified of him and things are really bad? On the other hand, she's trying to have a baby with him. These are conflicts that are pretty common in these types of relationships. But again, if you're not in one, you're not familiar with them from the outside, it just looks like somebody who is all over the place. Um, so I think it was a viable strategy. I think it clearly worked in the sense that it seems to have obviously persuaded some people on the jury that that this wasn't a situation where she shot out of desperation. It was a situation where she shot out of some other type of motive. So
Right. And also, before we go further, I just want to say as well that you can ask Andrea any question. Don't I mean, as much as I'm having fun over here, because I'm having so much fun asking all these questions, I don't want to have all the fun.
mhm.
I want you guys to have the fun as well. So there's a Q&A part that you can send your questions into, or you can ask it in the chat and I will just super chat it. But whichever one is easier for you guys to ask the questions, make sure you make sure you use that whatever is available, and I will try and make sure that Andrea gets your questions. Once again, like and share the stream, because just so that people get the right URL. But thank you everyone for that have been using the chat and have been communicating your feelings in regards to the case. I will read out some of the chats now. Kathy with a C says, "Why is stand your ground a valid defense for men but not for women? Ashley was not in her home, not dogs. Think Zimmerman, stalking and killing a black teen and found not guilty due to stand your ground." Andrea, what do you think? what do you say to that?
Well, Yeah, it's a good question, and that that counterpoint of case is pretty compelling, I think. So stand your ground. It's not really an independent law. It's just sort of a tweak of self-defense, a kind of nuance of self-defense. And the idea is simply that if you are in some place that you have a right to be, you don't have a duty to retreat in response to a threat of violence against you. You have the power, the legal right to stand your ground, to stay where you have the right to be, and to use the force to defend yourself. So that's why it applied in the the Trayvon Martin George Zimmerman case. He had a right to be out in this community area. He did not have a duty to retreat. The evidence did tend to show that Trayvon Martin was the aggressor in the situation, in the sense that he initiated the physical violence against George Zimmerman, and George Zimmerman was being beaten pretty badly when he did then resort to force in that situation. This particular case, clearly Ashley had the right to be where she was. The way it would be different without a stand your ground law would be there would be a lot more room to debate about what's the appropriate response here. Could she have simply run out the door? Could she have gone into another room and locked it? Basically, were there escape routes that she could have taken advantage of, rather than just jumping straight to, I'm going to defend myself with a firearm?
Yeah.
So that not being the law, they didn't have to go through that. They didn't have to establish any of those things. It wouldn't be relevant if she did, because she had the right to stay where she was and to defend herself. If everything else being equal, it fits the requirements for self-defense. I think the situation here, it's. I do sort of hate to say this, I really do, but this is what Amber Heard has wrought. Okay? It is.
Oh
It's not that nobody
gosh.
ever made a false accusation before Amber Heard, right? It's that's certainly not the case. But it's just hers was so high profile and so obviously,
False.
obviously false, obviously completely contradicted by any sort of objective measure of what was going on. Like, just about everything she said was a lie. And so this is what she has wrought, is that potentially there is a lot more suspicion now of women in these types of situations. Now that we are more aware that some women do lie, there's going to be more suspicion of any woman, and the question, is she lying in this situation? So I don't really see this as having to do necessarily with stand your ground in particular. I just think it has to do with, now that we're kind of back in this very nuanced world of domestic violence, where you have perfect victim tropes, right? You're not entitled to claim the mantle of domestic violence victim unless you acted in an unimpeachable manner throughout the entire process, and that's just rarely the case, because
Mm.
that's not how these relationships work. And so you have a situation where any instance of reactive abuse, any instance of just, not acting consistent with how we project you should act in that type of situation, or how we imagine we would act in that situation, never having been in it, that's really what we're dealing with in this situation, is just that tendency to judge somebody who is making an accusation like this from a standpoint that just may not be able to fully appreciate or sympathize with what it's like to be in that type of relationship.
Yeah, and it's not even, and these types of relationships has always had a massive problem in the legal system anyways,
Mhm.
before Amber Heard. And I doubt Amber Heard has caused, I mean, would you agree with me if I say that she's caused some kind of setback? I don't think that she has. I think that her case was too minuscule to cause any kind of ripple effect But what do you think? Like, do you think that she has made such a monumental impact that the approach to these cases are either too careless or too careful? Like, what do you think?
Well, I think that that the case had a pretty monumental impact. I mean, it's from what I can tell, when I think back, it's probably one of the most high profile um, rejections, like just flat, outright, complete rejection of her account, her version of events, her accusation that Johnny Depp abused her.
Mm.
Flat no, it didn't happen. Nobody bought it. So that usually, that usually doesn't happen. That's
Yeah,
pretty
well,
uncommon. And so for it to happen in such a high profile way, I think, and also just given the context that this was the height of Me Too, where the pendulum had really swung towards, oh, we're supposed to believe anything that women say, kind of no matter what, which is just, it's the problem with politics in general is all of these complicated things get brought to extremes. And the challenge with something like Me Too is that from my perspective, there were a lot of good ideas and kind of motivations behind it, but it just got taken to the extreme so quickly and so radically that it was going to be doomed to failure because of that. Because anybody with a working brain knows that, yeah, women lie sometimes, it happens, or people just remember things incorrectly. There's a lot of stuff that can go on. uh like women are not some magical truth tellers, anytime words come out of their mouth just by virtue of the fact that they're women. Like, it's the whole idea became very ridiculous. But that context was really important because it was such a rebuke of that context for that Depp v. Heard verdict to come down the way that it did. So I think what it did is it gave people permission to once again be suspicious of women. In and of itself, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that anytime somebody is accused of a crime, skepticism is the right approach. That's the
right.
scientific approach. You maintain a skeptical attitude until, proof beyond a reasonable doubt is presented. And so anytime somebody's making an accusation, I tend to think that's an appropriate approach to take. But it's just the point where skepticism shifts in favor, shifts to bias, shifts to, well, even as things are coming out. Like, for me personally, I don't know how you get past the hitting the dog and shooting the ceiling and not reach the conclusion that Doug Benefield was displaying abusive behaviors here. It was very clearly, those are very, very clearly abusive behaviors. And so it takes, from my perspective, a little bit of a kind of rationalization to still kind of see her as the perpetrator in light of evidence like that. But that's sort of the challenge, I think, because we have permission to be skeptical now. We also are perhaps a little bit more tolerant, or maybe just seeing more a bias in that type of situation. And so that's the way that, from my perspective, yeah, I think Amber Heard did have a massive impact that did not help domestic violence victims, real domestic violence victims, at all. Because
Mm.
now every single one of them, people are going to look at her and be like, okay, but are you another Amber Heard?
Right. And just to give a bit of a clarification, when I was mentioning Amber Heard about, and the verdict not having impact, I just meant legally in terms of changing
Mhm.
laws and all of those.
Sure.
Of course, without a shadow of a doubt, I think if you're blonde now, you're probably gonna go through probably a bit of a bad time getting people to, like, maybe, like, people might be a bit skeptical, be like, oh, I hope she's not Amber Heard. Like, that has actually
Mhm.
been, an effect, like, some people have received when, like, think when the case was going on, but I'm pretty sure it's died down now. So of course I definitely understand the effect, but in terms of the legal, yeah,
Mhm.
that's what more of I was referring to. And
Yeah. Yeah,
so
absolutely. Legally,
yeah,
the
so
case
sorry,
was
go
not
on.
significant at all. It forged no new ground at all.
Yeah. which I got I'm gonna answer some of your some of your questions now. So Leslie Ann Moon says, Andrea, do you think the verdict was fair and correct? That's a question from Leslie Ann Moon. What do you think, Andrea?
Yeah, it's a very, very, very tough question. If you're asking me, would that have been my vote if I were a juror? I would say probably not. My vote as a juror, I probably would have voted to acquit. I saw enough to convince me that yes, this was an abusive relationship. I did not find her incredible when she was testifying, mainly on the cross examination. It was a very bizarre situation where she came off better on cross than she did on direct, in my opinion. But she did not seem to me to be over egging the pudding. Like if she was trying to fabricate what had happened, I would think she would have come up with a different story. There would have been more of a pattern of physical abuse, for example, but she denied that there had been any physical abuse up to
Mm,
that point.
yeah,
This was
yeah.
the first time that he had ever struck her, according to her. Her answers, she was not, it wasn't a situation, like with Amber Heard, there were a couple moments where you can kind of see like there's a freeze and like you can see how do I get to this? How do I answer this in a way that's going to be consistent? Her answers, I thought, came out very, very quick, very not prepared, very spontaneous. And so it didn't seem like a situation where she's having to like hunt for the story.
Mm,
This is all just my read, and everybody can have different reads on credibility of witnesses and stuff like that. But I did personally tend to find it believable. I tended to find the physical evidence was not inconsistent with what she said. So it really just came down to, I think, the perception of, was this a reasonable and proportionate response? That's the hard one. That's the hard
mm.
one because, you know, it's hard for a man to kill a woman with his bare hands. He wasn't armed in this situation. Now, obviously, I'm not going to say it never happens, and I'm not going to say that she's like required to wait until that's what's on the table,
Right, right.
before she takes action to react to it.
Mm,
Um, but that's where I can see how, even though I wouldn't have voted that way, I would have said yes. I think this was justifiable self-defense. I can see how a juror could look at that and say, I think this was premature. I think that that this was excessive under these particular circumstances. There just wasn't enough of an indication, even if he, slapped her or whatever it was, that she said, happened for physical contact. That's not enough to put you in fear that your life is going to be lost to justify shooting another human being. So I really can't be too critical of the juror's decision in this particular case, even if it's not necessarily the one I personally would have reached.
right. I hope that does satisfy your question there, Leslie Ann Moon. I just want to notify you, Andrea, that your video is frozen a little bit. It just became frozen at the tail end of your or statement. So I'm not sure what's happened. If possible, could you like refresh your camera if possible?
Sure.
Just it's most likely my end. Uh, so while Andrea is taking care of all of that, I'll just read out a couple more of the chats. Bethan Shermy says, "Okay, yeah, you're back now. Yeah, you're back now.
Okay.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, so yeah, sorry, yeah, just a maybe just a connectivity issue then. Okay, so Bethan Shermy says, it's so wild to me that folks were saying her testimony was just like Amber Heard's. Their testimony were night and day different to me. I think
Mhm.
we'll get to the prosecution in a bit because they were using the language, you know, the fake crying, there was no tears, they were using all that language. But I don't. No, I actually agree with this comment. I actually don't think that she's like Amber Heard at all. I think
Mhm.
Amber Heard has caused so much trauma that anytime someone cries or something like that, people are just like, oh, no, defense mechanism. Nope, this someone you might try and manipulate me, so I'm not gonna believe you extra hard now because you have decided to cry. I think that's just all that's happened. I do think that obviously I wasn't in the courtroom, so I don't know what the prosecution saw. Maybe they didn't actually see any tears at all whatsoever. But in my opinion, I do think that she was genuinely afraid, which is why I'm so hinged on this psychology of her, whether um she has some kind of flashback to the whole punching the dog in the face, or even the shooting in the like it doesn't even have to be those two memories. She can even make up a memory that's untrue just based on those two memories of a scenario,
Mhm.
just to cause enough fear. I mean, that is the reality of the situation. So with the absence of knowing how she is, mentally, and knowing that there's nothing wrong with her, it becomes very hard for me to be like, yeah, that reaction is justified. She never established. I will keep saying this. I mean, it's not a DV trial. You will never find me taking up a dog and saying that he's the best person. I'll leave that forever. And Tommy, that's family for. That's not my job. I don't know this guy. But but just based on the evidence alone, there is no, I can't take up for him and be like, yeah, he's a saint, like he didn't commit DV. He did. I will always say that. But I
Mhm.
don't think there is any scenario that I can think of that would justify someone because of prior DV acts that they can now kill somebody. I mean, let me put it to you actually. Um,
Mhm.
has there ever been a case in the history of legal system where somebody has killed someone because of DV, and DV was the main money, was the acquitting factor behind uh their defense?
Yeah, so the case that I was kind of describing when I was first talking about how battered women syndrome, they call it battered person or battered spouse now, but historically battered women syndrome, the way that that kind of got introduced in the courts in the first place, that was in a case in Washington that it actually happened, where a woman killed her husband while he slept and relied on this defense. Um, so it does happen. I can't say that I know that it happens frequently. I think most of the time when the jury comes in and they're aware that somebody has been killed, they're not looking to excuse the perpetrator, and that's a big hurdle, I think, that women in this situation always have to overcome, whether it is clearly justified or less clearly justified. Um, they're the ones that at least have the initial burden of establishing, from a legal standpoint, that this was self-defense. So, yeah, I mean, these are just tough situations. Like, I didn't see her like Amber Heard at all. And the main reason why, I mean, I talked a little bit about how I took some of her testimony, especially on cross-examination, but the biggest difference that I see between them, and it was instantly the standout thing from Amber Heard's testimony for me, is her unwillingness to concede anything at all, like even small, pointless little things. She simply would not. She had to be in the right. She had to be blameless. She had to be perfect. She had to be, sainted, basically. And so even on small things where it didn't really matter, like the relationship with the step kids, for just stuff like that, she always had to have this halo on, and her testimony reflected that. With Ashley, I felt that she was a lot more willing to accept that gray area and that nuance, her own um, just the decisions that she made along the way that probably with the benefit of hindsight, I would imagine she regrets some of those, maybe quite a few of them. But not nearly as much as Amber, in that just constantly defensive, constantly justifying herself. Any new piece of bad information, she's going to have to, come up with an excuse for it or something like that. That's what Amber did, and I really didn't see Ashley doing that at all. She was very quick to concede things like how, what he paid for, and that he had never hit her before this stage. It's just things like that had it been Amber Heard on the stand, no, I think we would have gotten a different story. Doc, I have lost your sound. I can't hear you.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes. Now you're back.
I was wondering. Okay, I do apologize. I do apologize for that. I will read it again. It says, Bethan Shemi says, Andrea, can you clarify the stand? Can you clarify the stand your ground hearing? Can you clarify? Question mark. The stand your ground hearing was potentially to get her off without a trial at all. Correct. Mm-hmm. It seems the media
Yes.
has used the denial as proof her account is entirely false. Yeah. So go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a fair read. I saw a lot of reporting about that hearing that I thought was pretty questionable. Maybe they just didn't understand kind of the nature of what this hearing was or how it worked. But yes, the way that it works in Florida is she's entitled to a preliminary kind of determination of whether self-defense is established as a matter of law. And so these would be situations where it's the facts in and of themselves are not really that disputed. I can think of situations of like, an armed robbery, a stranger armed robbery or something like that. Maybe the situation is captured on videotape. It's a situation where there's not necessarily a lot of really just dispute about what was going on. So it's probably going to be rare that happens, because you would hope that situations like that get screened out in the charging decision, that the prosecutor would look at all of that and decide, no, this was clearly self-defense. We're not going to put this person through a criminal legal process. But that doesn't always happen. So she was entitled for a decision about whether the evidence compelled the conclusion that she was acting in self-defense. The judge's ruling was essentially, no, it did not. There's enough gray area here that a jury needs to be the one to make the decision about whether she did, in fact, act in self-defense. And so, yeah, I saw a lot of bad reporting on that, suggesting that like, oh, the judge found it was not self-defense or things like that just, are not, they're not true. They're not accurately reflecting what was going on in that part of the legal process. And I do always wonder to some extent how much that affects people's perception of what's going on in the trial, whether there's been a just result here. If they're being misled about the process that got to this point, then it seems pretty hard to conclude that your evaluation of the process is well grounded.
Right. I hope that answers your question there, Bethan Shermy. Oh no, I was dreading on clicking on your super chat today. I was ready on clicking on your name, but Zach, hey, the unintelligible juror. That's what Zach says. Hi, Zach, welcome. Says down payment on the 6 million. Also, Andrea is a cool lady. You have a fan here. His name is Zach. is also kind
Exactly.
of weird. He says things like, Andrea, why did you beat me so badly in boxing the other day? Just saying you were having a bad
Because you
heyday.
came at me. Don't come at me, you won't get none.
Oh, you gotta love Zach. I didn't know you two knew each other off here. Oh wow. Oh. Okay, so Publicly Buzz, welcome to the stream. Thank you so much for joining our Phoebe MC. Yes, Andrea, yeah, I'm in the minority as you. Apparently, that's okay. I stand my ground regardless. I still think the age of the jury played a role. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think the prosecution made a lot of missteps. We will discuss. I believe she has to. I believe Andrea just has to
Sorry.
handle a couple of. Was that a
I'm
chicken?
still here. I had to
Was
let the
that a
dog
chicken?
out real
Yeah.
fast. He was getting anxious.
Oh, that was the doggo. I could hear scratching. I was wondering what
Yeah.
that was. I could hear scratching
Well,
on the
that
door.
was him sleeping. That was actually just him sleeping, and he has this little corner here that he gets all kind of wrapped up in, and he likes to sleep and then he starts to dream and like kick the wall and stuff. So anyway.
Okay. Before you had to handle and take care of the dog, um it was in regards to the stand your ground and whether it was even sufficient enough for Ashley to even argue that to begin with. By the way, Zach, thank you for the $4.99 super chat. I appreciate that. But in regards to Ashley in this case, and with the there is, I don't think her defense was the best in my opinion. And that's just my opinion because there were, I mean, and it's just stemmed from day one. I mean, first impressions are everything. And and I always look at myself as a potential juror. And you're coming in, and this is a lot of you would know what I'm talking about. A lot of you that did watch the trial would know what I'm talking about here when he was cross-examining Tommy Benefield,
Yes,
Doug's
I know
cousin.
what you're talking about on this one too.
I feel to get the video in all fairness because it was really embarrassing, but I wasn't planning to make this point, to be quite fair. I didn't think it would I didn't think Ashley actually had this much support. In fact, this case is very divided, so I really wasn't sure what to think. To show how divided it is, the last stream that I done on it last week, I lost a lot of subscribers. I lost at least 17 subscribers or something like that. And I was kind of shocked. I was surprised. I was like, wow, I didn't know. Because it's the same views as today. It was just, I just don't believe her. And I feel that that like the child custody had a lot to play with that. And we will go into that later on. But this particular impression, this, coming in, he was accusing Doug of sorry, not Doug, he was accusing Tommy of basically saying that Ashley picked the wrong Benefield, and he
Yeah,
was
being a creep. He was accusing him of being a creep. And then it didn't land at all. And now you've just made your client look like a histrionic fake accuser. Good job.
I did not know. I did not understand why that even had to be. I don't even know why you had to fight so hard for that point. Because I was thinking, wait, this has to be, like your slam dunk. This has to be the smoking gun. And he's like, wrong Benefield. And I'm like, I was like, wait. I was like, wait, that's your gun, wrong Benefield. So when I saw that, I was just like, does she have a case? What is coming? So I was very attentive and looking for, okay, what was Doug doing? Because that's what the prosecution kept hammering at her. What did he do? What did he do? And she just never answered that question. She said she lunged, but his injuries are not consistent with a lunge. You don't shoot someone from the leg with a lunge. When you add up all of this, I was like, something happened there, but she's embellishing something from there, and it's what's lost her the case, because there is no way it was pretty much established at all that Doug was at all a threat to her. In fact, 7 days before, they were talking all lovely, on the phone, and like, that was established. So there was no way for me that she was gonna get acquitted just based on just how the case began. It just felt like they were really desperate to try and make Ashley be like someone that was really controlled and coercively controlled into a lot of her actions, including taking a child away from him and not informing about a child for obvious safety reasons, and then the custody battles. What do you think of that?
Hmm. Um, I think so. I didn't particularly take issue with the physical evidence. I didn't think that it tended to disprove or prove her account one way or the other. I think that there was, some evidence of injury to her. Obviously, nothing life threatening or even, particularly major, like no broken bones or anything like that. Um, but stuff that could be consistent or not, with what she's reporting. It's just a little bit hard to say. As far as the mechanics of the shooting goes, I think there's always a little bit of a challenge in a situation like this to expect somebody to have a like video like memory, of exactly what happened. And I think that was part of the problem with the whole approach of asking her to reconstruct, to demonstrate how did this happen. There were clearly things that she didn't remember very clearly. She said she didn't remember very clearly. The prosecutor's like, she's like, his legs went up. Prosecutor, like, how high did they went up? Well, I don't, I don't remember. It's just not how human memory works, and particularly not memories of traumatic events. We have this perception that if something is really traumatic and impactful, you're going to have a clearer memory of that than something else. But that's actually the opposite. You have a less accurate memory of it. You're just more likely to be emotionally invested in the memory that you have created. And I say created because, just the way that we understand memory now, it is not a passive receiving of things, through our eyeballs into our brain. It gets recorded the way that like this whole video process is working. It's just not like that at all. It's a constant process of the brain choosing, selecting through, sorting through pieces, deciding what's important, what's not, revising it over time. So I think that's part of the challenge in holding her to a standard of like being able to relate an incident that perfectly lines up, from beginning to end with the wounds that you see on his body. To me, I didn't find it to be inconsistent because I would expect this to be a fairly frantic, everybody is moving around kind of situation. If she's trying to get away from him, I don't know how she's oriented to him. I don't know how he's moved. Like, it didn't seem to me to be particularly problematic in that sense. Like, it certainly wasn't a situation where he's shot, several times in the back, which incidentally is a case that I was familiar with back here in my old town where I used to practice Walla Walla, a self-defense case where a shop owner shot a fleeing burglar. He was 100 feet away in the back. And he did not get charged because it was found that they would not be able to disprove self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. I take issue with that decision. Nevertheless, my point is just this isn't a case like that, where it's that the evidence seems pretty clearly inconsistent with the account that's being given. So that was just my personal take on it. But like I said, opinions on this can definitely differ.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. And in fact, even add to your point in regards to the memory issue, I actually agree with you. I gave her the maximum benefit of the doubt but I do have to ask, what more can the jury do if they don't have a clear enough picture? What more can a system do? What more can a jury do if they don't have a clear enough picture of what actually happened? And it is kind of unfortunate that the trauma response kicked in at that point, because people have expressed that they felt that a lot of what we saw was trauma response, and the memories is pretty much a response. You know, it's pretty much as a result of that. But what more can a jury do if you do not provide them with the tools that they need to kind of acquit you if you were in serious danger? Like, you know, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, my, of course, knee-jerk response is that the benefit of the doubt always goes to the defense. That's what the presumption of innocence really is. You know, it's the state's burden to prove their version. It's not the burden on the defense. And that, in fact, I don't recall. I actually am going to see if I can look really quickly for Florida law. So in some cases, self-defense has to be disproven beyond a reasonable doubt by the state. And in some cases, it's entirely a burden that is on the defense. Let me see if I can find that out real quick.
Yeah, because that's a very important nuance as well. Because with her pleading self-defense as well, she has to. I think someone did ask a question, and I probably should have went to that next. It would have really helped with a lot of context. But someone did ask a question: did she had to testify because she, because she pleaded self-defense? And
so the answer that I am getting very quickly is that Florida requires the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did not act in self-defense. So that is the same as it is in my state in Washington. And typically what that means then is the defense has an initial burden of production just to prove that self-defense is applicable here. That there are facts that if you believe all of those facts, then you would be justified in finding self-defense. Doesn't mean you will believe all those facts, just that a person, if they did believe them, would be justified in so finding. And so then once you have met that initial burden of production, the burden is now on the state to prove that's not how it went. So I guess to answer your question then, that's where I go back to. If the jury has questions about the evidence and what it tends to establish or not, that weighs against the prosecution 100% of the time and in all ways. So if they have not disproven beyond a reasonable doubt that her version of events is true, that happened, then she should be acquitted under the law.
Okay, well, we will talk about sentencing very, very soon. But I do want to say we have 31 viewers, but only 26 likes. What is going on, guys? My maths is not great. I know I didn't pass maths in school, but that's not mathing. It's not equal. So make sure you hit the like button, guys, and also subscribe as well. Publicly Buzz said, "I want to live wherever the hell Dr. Hines' green screen is." Look, Publicly Buzz there. We do not have the luxuries to have an amazing background like Andrea's, which is a gold mine, by the way. Love Heidi's work, but this is
amazing.
I am working towards getting this guy here. This is Ketchup Man, and he will be appearing on your screens very, very soon. But I am looking to get this guy plastered on my. Once that happens, yes, unfortunately, I will have to leave my humble abode here. It is very cozy. It looks very nice. I would have to vacate so that I can accommodate this little side guy that eats nachos. But here we are. So that is, if you want to come live here, once this guy goes up on here, you can pretty much take up the rent. I can't afford it anymore. Let me go to some more questions here. Okay, so okay, let me open the tab so that I can refresh the questions. All right. I believe, okay, no new questions are in. Just check everything. Okay. Nothing like being shamed by a British accent, Zach says. Okay. Fair enough. So I so I want to go with like we so in regards to the prosecution, because I did want to go into that, especially there was a lot of comments in regards to the language that she was using in when addressing Ashley, and it was just always liar, hoaxer, and also no tears. And with that type of defense, like it's that I understand win at all costs, but can that backfire? Like, like was it wise to even use that defense? Like, because it was being watched. At what point do lawyers go in and out of decorum? What I'm basically trying to ask is, like, how do you lawyers approach putting on such a scathing attack of someone's credibility where you have got evidence to corroborate why you would attack this way, because of the fact that she did. There is a whole custody element to it. The fact that she called the police so many times and the police didn't even find evidence of everything that she was claiming for, and this all happened in short space of time. When you have those evidence, you had the impetus, but how do lawyers make that decision? Because a lot of people were watching the trial and were like, I can't believe I'm hearing a lawyer speak about DV victims in this manner. Like, imagine if this was, she was a credible DV victim, but on that day she wasn't, which is what the law was trying to get across. But like, how do you guys usually approach that, especially with people watching? And, does that factor in what usually goes on, if you understand where
Yeah,
I'm coming from?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, because a lot of those decisions, they come down to style, and they just come down to personal judgment. Personally, if I was the prosecutor on this case, I would not be able to look myself in the mirror after conducting the trial the way that they handled it. It's interesting to me to find the shoe a little bit on the other foot in this case, because I'm used to dealing with situations where my client is the accused, and so I'm the one who has to interview the victim, has to cross-examine the victim, and so for me personally, I have had to develop a style that you know I tend to think is effective. I mean, I have fairly good results as a lawyer, but it's also something that, I am very cognizant of the possibility that I could be wrong, of the possibility that this is somebody who has been severely traumatized. I don't want to be part of the problem in that situation. That would be, that's a very big burden, I think, to take on. Uh, so, from my personal approach, my strategy is to simply let the facts speak for themselves. I don't tend to be a real argumentative lawyer during my presentation anyway. That's what you have closing arguments for, is to tie the pieces together. I'm much more of a show, don't tell type of person. So, if you have the evidence, the false police reports, the things like that, you simply present it. And those facts have an amazing ability to tell the story that you want them to tell, just by how you bring them out, and the order that you present them, and things like that. So the jury is typically not so dumb that they need you, to tie everything together for them with a bow. Like, they're going to get what you're getting at when you point out, but you made all of these police reports. None of these police reports were ever found. CPS was even involved in this, and the children were, he wasn't barred from having custody with the children. You can tell the story through the facts without having to get so personal with it. And so that's how I have learned to conduct a case like this. For me personally, that's what works. That's how, I can be in a situation where I recognize, yes, I am questioning somebody who might, in fact, really be a victim in this situation. And I have some assurance that I am doing my job in the way that is least likely to cause, more harm for them by just having to go through this process. I did not care for the prosecution's approach to it at all for that reason, but I think it's a high risk, high reward type of strategy. If they get people on the jury who believe them and buy into their version of events, then that's a big win for them, because proving intent to kill, murder,
Oh.
it's fairly tough. It's fairly tough. You have to convince the jury that your read on this defendant and your read on this situation is pretty spot on, because you never have direct evidence of what is in somebody's mind, right? It's always circumstantial. So, I mean, to me, I think that explains why they did it. You raise a very interesting point that I hadn't thought about it, but actually, since you
I
raised
did.
it, I'm like, that
Wait,
could
I did.
factor into
Oh,
which
okay. I'll take
the
it.
whole issue of it being televised,
Oh,
and
okay.
so I'm a huge proponent of cameras in courtrooms. I am of the perspective that more transparency in the courts is better.
Mhm.
People need to understand. There's like a hunger to understand, like from just a basic civic standpoint, what is going on in our courtrooms. And so the more you can see, the better you can understand, and then the better you can evaluate it and critique it, and determine, is this working the way that we want it to work? Do there need to be changes? Things like that. So I love cameras in courtrooms. However, one of the common criticisms of them is, I think this is more often the case when cameras are not routine. When it's unusual to have a camera in there, then yeah, there can be a tendency to perform for the camera. And I do now that you've brought that up. I wonder if that was part of that decision making process. That they're not just playing to these particular jurors, but they're also playing to the court of public opinion. And so all of those same things, uh, that I mentioned, as far as if you can get people to buy into it, that's a high reward type of strategy.
Mm.
That some of that is not just appealing to this particular jury that's deciding the case, but also to the public at large that's watching and evaluating.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm glad that I contributed thought. um,
Oh,
but
don't sell yourself short.
I appreciate that. I promise I won't. But yeah, like I also want. I have a couple of announcements to make. I want to say that the channel anniversary. Well, I'm gonna call it. I'm putting together a stream for the channel's anniversary because we're coming up to like 2 years now. So I'm pretty. I want to reflect. So I'm putting up. I'm gonna go through a bit of just hang out with you guys and go through my YouTube journey and how many channels I actually have, because I actually have a lot of channels, believe it or not. I've actually been doing it since 2018. It's just I've never done it successfully. So yeah, so if you're interested, make sure you join the 1 year anniversary show. It's called the Heinz Pop-Out Show. I'm gonna have some guests on. I'm going to be updating you guys with that anyway. So do keep an eye out for that. That's pretty much. And also Hindsight, we are live tomorrow at on Wednesday, at 6 o'clock. Sorry, 6:30 UK time. So that's 1:30 Eastern time. I've got to get used to that. Time zones exist, and not everyone. Not everywhere is using my time. So I've got to get used. But yeah, like that's pretty much all that's in store. I just wanted to say that. I'll go back into the chats, and I do have a couple more questions before we close out, but I'm gonna go back into the chat. Kirsty Jones says, maybe I'm naive, but I believed her. The prosecution making her create the shooting sealed for me. I don't know. I think that's where it lost it for me. I don't know what sealed it for you, Andrea.
Honestly, for me, him punching the dog sealed it for me. That's pretty much game over. Like that's for me, that's game over. There's no innocent explanation for punching the dog. There's no excuse for punching the dog. The fact that he was trying to excuse punching the dog to me, no, this I can clearly now identify abuser victim. That made it crystal clear to me. And so once I was able to make that determination, then I can look at how she is testifying and how she is describing, what she says happened and everything like that. I can look at it through that framework. And then my question is just, is it consistent with that, or is it inconsistent with that? If it's consistent with that, then I'm going to tend to believe it. And you're going to have to show me it's inconsistent with that for me to think that there was something else going on here that would make her guilty of a crime. So that's what turned it for me.
Fair enough. I don't know why. I mean, maybe I'm too cynical. Maybe I was too. Can I call it? I'm gonna call it objective because that's what I thought I was being. Maybe I was too objective, but I just saw through the tears. I don't know. I just didn't believe. I was like, I know it was a scary moment, and I really do believe it's because even if I do think personally, I do think that the prosecution's theory of the case, I think it was too risky. I think it would have been so easy to flip up on it, because even if Ashley was engaging in parental alienation and trying to stop Doug from seeing her, she did have justified reasons, whether we like her or not. She did have it. So it would have been something where Ashley would pretty much just have to be like, how do I say it? The fact that she shot him and she couldn't describe pretty much, the shooting and the whole thing, it sealed it for me because of, that it's just because I was like, it does speak to her mental state. It does speak to the fact that she was terrified, corroborated by the gun mechanics falling apart. But it's just, I don't know. It's just, when I saw it, something tells me that even if the prosecution were right and she did have the mind to go in and kill Doug, the only reason why she was acting like that is because of the fact that she's actually now in a moment that you actually have to follow through with this and actually do it. I'm going full on prosecution case. That now you're about to do this, you're going to have feelings after the fact, you're going to have feelings during. You're never going to be prepared to take someone's life. So I personally felt everything that I was seeing, it was kind of filtered through that lens, that regardless, she will do this. And it is a very simple, unless she's a psychopath. I don't think she's a psychopath. I don't think she's a sociopath. But unless you're kind of like that, you can't fake that. Like, you are going to naturally lean into that because you were genuinely scared. But why you were scared is the debate. But I think that she was genuinely scared because she knew she had to do this, because she was actually about to lose someone she valued way more than Doug, and that was Emerson. And that was coming out through the custody battle. That was actually established. So when I looked at that, I was like, there is, the prosecution has presented a defense, a case that does seem weak on his face, because I wouldn't approach like that. But I didn't think it had legs, but the fact that I saw her do what she did, I was like, that's a bit disingenuous. I think that just shows that you actually did have an element of forethought, and it was just unfortunate that maybe this thing did set you off. And I think that reflects the verdict. I think that's why they went with manslaughter rather than planning out. Yeah, that's what I think anyway. But I do have the question: what's the difference between first and second degree? Like, is the intent key for all of that?
So first-degree murder is premeditated. They're both intentional murder, but first-degree murder is premeditated. And so it means you've thought it over beforehand. There's often a fairly fine line between first and second degree because prosecutors will argue that thinking over can happen in seconds. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have thought it over a week before. Although if you have proof that they did think it over the week before, the Google searches about how to murder my husband and get away with it kind of thing, that can
Husband to
be,
die in
very
cold.
helpful in proving your case.
Sorry.
But there are also situations where they will, they will argue it looks like maybe something that sort of happened spontaneously, but the prosecution will argue, you made the deliberate determination to pull out your gun and point it and pull the trigger, and those are things that didn't happen instantaneously, so you had time to process that to make the determination that you were going to do it. That's what makes it premeditated. That's the technical difference between them. Second degree murder, it's just intentional. You intended to do the act. You intended to pull the trigger. You intended to kill the person. You intended that outcome, but you didn't necessarily plan it out ahead of time.
Right. Okay. So I'm guessing as well, first degree murder would also be like, let's say that you've killed in such a manner that even if premeditation didn't exist, but you've killed in such a manner that they have lost their life, in such a manner that it could also be first degree. Am I right by thinking that, or is that just you definitely need to be premeditated to have first degree?
Typically, you definitely have to be premeditated to get first degree. There's different. So what you're getting at is that there can be different mental state requirements to prove murder. Like you can have murder that is not necessarily intentional murder. There are cases, some jurisdictions where they will have things like what we call grave indifference, basically like whether you intended to kill them or not, you did not care at all about whether they were going to survive, this
Right.
altercation
You
between
mentioned,
you,
yeah.
something like that. Yeah, extreme disregard for human life is another way that it's often put. So yeah, there can be ways that murder is defined that are not intentional, that do have those kinds of broader circumstances. But the basic difference between first and second degree is still typically going to be premeditated versus not premeditated.
Right. Thank you for that explanation. And the mods Valhalla awaits, and also Random Girl. Thank you so much for modding today. I really do appreciate you. The Heinz report is actually out for this, so you can go check that out. It's got all the details of the case. I think I posted it in the chat over on Ketchup Court TV, the spiciest court in the land. Yeah, you can pretty much go check it out there because Andrea was funny. Just so you saw that smile perk.
I just love the idea. I have this idea of ketchup as the spiciest, and so I'm I'm like, is this sriracha ketchup or?
But yeah, like the report is there, so I have attached it to both to both streams. So yeah, go and download that. I shall be making it available on my site. So after this stream, I will be privating the links. Oops, sorry about that. Just for but I just want to let you know. But yeah, it shall be out tomorrow. Or pretty much tonight. Yeah, I just got a few more details to fill in, and it's gonna be updated as we go along. But yes, it shall be available to all members of the channel. Again, on all the members, Random Girl, Anya Levine, I appreciate every single one of you for becoming members. I do appreciate it. If you want to become a member of the channel, you can become a member of the channel by hitting the join button, and then all of the tiers will come up. But yeah, a lot more content is coming out. It'll be very easier for me to just do a video on what you guys are gonna get. If you do decide to subscribe to me. So yeah, so keep an eye out for that because the video on that is coming. So I will end on this because there was a question asked to you. So But I wanna ask you this question. So if you had a client like Ashley Benefield, right, walk
Mhm.
through the door, and then details to you exactly Doug's, what's basically happened, how would you approach a case like that? What would you have done differently or the same, up to you, um, that the defense did or didn't do in this case?
Mhm. I can't really criticize much of what the defense did in this case from that kind of preparation standpoint. Most of the time, when the defendant walks into your office, a lot of the damage has already been done. You know, if you've come to me before, you've spoken to the police, for example, I can give you some advice about maybe whether that's a good idea or not.
Mm.
But otherwise, you're just dealing with a lot of what has already taken place, and so the best thing you can do is to really just thoroughly investigate that as much as you can. And it does appear that they did that here with the going into the all of the former police reports, the child custody dispute, the CPS stuff, um, getting their own experts on board again is a situation that's really critical if you're going to take a case like this to trial. It's one thing to have a person getting on the stand to say, yes, this was a violent relationship, and here's how I reacted to it, and so forth. It's a whole other thing to be able to bring somebody in who has specific expertise in these types of relationships, who understands the dynamics and can look from the outside at stuff that is pretty objective, like, for example, text messages between you. How do you communicate with each other? This is super common in domestic violence cases to do that. You get the entire text history between the people, because it tells you so much about the dynamic between them. Who is accusatory? Who is placating? Who is escalating? Who is bringing up old things? Just all of these types of things that you can look at to get a sense of what the dynamics were. The decision that they made, that it's always a challenge in any kind of criminal case, but in my personal opinion, it was the right one in this case, and is the right case a lot of the times, is for the defendant to testify. I just don't think, as a practical matter, there is really any way in a case like this that you are going to be able to get the jury on your side if she doesn't do that. And this is one where my view on the defendant testifying is very much kind of contrary to the standard narrative. I tend to look at this as like the judicial equivalent of classical economics versus behavioral economics,
Mm.
right? So I'm speaking your language now a little bit. The common wisdom is very much this classical economic sense, where what are the upsides, what are the costs and benefits of this person testifying, what is the upside of it versus what is the risk of it, and based on that, I'll make my decision about whether they testify or not accordingly. I don't subscribe to this because I don't think that jurors typically decide things in that fashion. Decision making is far more complicated than just, we're getting the law and we're applying it to the facts. We'd love for that to be the case, but I think it's just a simple reality that it's not. And so the jury always has questions, and who this person is, wanting to get a feel for this person and what they are being accused of. That is just a very deep seated desire that I think pretty much any juror has. And so even though they're always going to be instructed, you can't hold it against her if she doesn't testify. Uh, it's difficult. It's very, very difficult, I think, for them to abide by that, because there's just always the question of, if this is the case, why not? Why wouldn't you? My personal experience is that juries can be enormously forgiving of things that are common reasons for not calling a defendant to the stand. Oh, they have too many prior convictions that are going to come up to impeach them. Oh, they've given too many inconsistencies, or just they didn't come off well in one particular context. My personal experience is that if the person who is testifying uh, knows knows what the likely weak points are, and is prepared to explain them, not in an Amber Heard, I'm going to, justify everything that happened kind of way, but in a way that is actually authentic. Maybe you don't make any excuses. Maybe you admit, yes, I did lie in that situation, and here's why I did it, and I probably shouldn't have, but whatever. Jurors can be very forgiving of those types of things. So I tend to favor defendants testifying far more than I think the average criminal defense lawyer does. In this case in particular, I very, very much support that decision. I think there is a very high likelihood that she gets convicted of murder if she does not get on the stand, because there's just this perception of she has the ability to pitch her version to us and chose not to do it. I think people just are always inherently going to wonder why.
Andrea Burkhart, thank you so much for joining me and discussing this case. I know when I get off this, I'm going to have questions flood in as well, so hopefully we can pick this up, because that's what happened last time we spoke, in regards to last time you were here, we spoke about Debbie Heard. I had so many questions rushed back, and and I was like, dying to ask you that question, but unfortunately I couldn't. But I didn't write it down, so it means nothing now. But I did watch back our interview to try and get my mind back, to try and think, okay, what were those questions? Well, I want to ask them now, but nothing came back, so unfortunately. But I know it will happen. But 62% of you believe that the jury finding of the Ashley Benefield verdict of manslaughter was correct. 37% believe no, it wasn't correct, which is quite interesting, because I do believe it's correct, because I believe it makes sense that it would be unintentional, because from what she was describing, that's what it would sound like. But at the same time, I think just the fact that he got shot in the chest, I think that was and also on the leg as well as the side. I think the side destroyed the case for her, because the chest is understandable. That's lunging towards you as corroborating her story, but they didn't get the leg part. And I don't think, like I said, I don't think the defense done a good job in trying to explain how the bullet might have ended up in the leg. They try to do the whole show don't tell and be like, because the medical examiner said that it's more likely that Ashley was just in so much distress that she was just not a great aim. And in the closing statements, I was waiting for Neil to drive it home and be like, yeah, she was in distress because this guy was coming at her, so she had to aim, and the first shot was the chest, as said by the medical. I was expecting that. Nothing happened, so I was like, okay. And just like that. So I do think that the jury got the right one on manslaughter, and they took it very seriously. But that case was hard for me. It was hard to watch because it just felt like the prosecutors just did not really hate this girl, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's probably some text messages in there that said she's a piece of, all those things. But like Karen Reed anyway. I'm not gonna go into triple practice Texas anyway. What you got coming up? What's new? What's new? Do you have any announcements for this week?
Well, I've been enjoying summer here, so I have not been super busy on the YouTube front since Alec Baldwin that trial ended. I am planning to fire things up on Friday for the Karen Reed hearing. This is the one that the defense has filed the motions to basically ask to dismiss counts 1 and 3 on double jeopardy grounds, because jurors have come forward and said that we intended to acquit her on those counts. We all had unanimously agreed she's not guilty on those counts. It's a very, very interesting situation because it's just one where factually it seems very, very sympathetic to Karen Reed, but legally they have such enormous hurdles that they would have to clear to be able to get this relief. I don't think that it's likely to happen. But I'm, very intrigued by it. So we'll be firing things up on Friday to take a look at that. Looking down the road, I am very much still following Brian Koberger. He's got a noted motion hearing set up for August the 29th. This is on the motion to change venue. He's argued that Latah County, is basically disproportionately affected by the media, as well as just kind of the own inherent problems you're always going to have with a small community in a crime of this nature. So they're arguing it for it to be moved to Ada County, which is where Boise is, the main population center in the state. So I will definitely be following that as well. Further down the road, the big thing that I have on the horizon is in October and November. I will be going to Indiana to watch the Richard Allen trial. This is the Delphi case. It has been going on for, many, many years at this point. This was a missing persons case. Then it became an unsolved murder case. And then it became a case where Richard Allen has been tried. He has just recently been released from prison back into local jail. This man had been kept in solitary confinement in prison for nearly 2 years without having ever been convicted of a crime. There's just a lot of really kind of messy stuff going on with this case, and there has not been a lot of transparency to it because the judge is quite hostile to the cameras in the courtroom. So there will not be cameras in the courtroom for this trial. That is why I am going to Indiana to watch it, because there's going to be a higher need for good information and not more of this stuff like, oh, the stand your ground hearing means she can't claim self-defense, kind of reporting. So going to be very time consuming. That will be most of October and November. That's the bulk of what I have on my schedule for right now. So then in the meantime, it's just kind of, I hate to say this because it sounds very self-indulgent, but honestly, it kind of is. If something interests me, I'll cover it. And if it doesn't, I won't. And subscribe, get the notifications if you want to see, when I'm going to be popping up to talk about something that has interested me. I don't necessarily plan a lot of that stuff out way ahead of the time.
Yeah, and make sure you check out Andrea's Substack as well. Thank you so much, Random Girl, for that. Make sure you check out her Substack. She has a great prowess with the pen, even though I know it's a keyboard, but get my metaphor. It's a pen, all right? She has great prowess with literature. I love reading it. Make sure you check out her Substack. Outside of that, just announcements for this week. The only time I'm going to be multi-streaming will be Verdict Talk, where it's done on both channels. But outside of that, exclusive live streams will be for both channels. You can tune in for Hindsight tomorrow on Wednesday, as well as the unintentional juror podcast this Sunday, where we are looking into Corey Richards' trial. That trial is coming up very, very soon, and that has really piqued my interest. Apparently, the prosecution is basically saying that she murdered her husband because of life insurance and all of those. I haven't. I heard about the case a month or two ago, back in May. I don't know. And I've been looking forward to have seeing this go to trial. So I can't wait to at least provide, watch the case and provide commentary on it. So make sure you tune in for the Unintentional Juror podcast, where I kind of give my first prima thoughts of the case, and then we go from there. So so those two shows, don't miss it. But a lot of the live streams that we have will be listed on the live tab, so go check them out on there. And I promise I'm going to get better on this. I am. I feel more confident. I do. I'm not starring no more. That's pretty good for me. But Andrea, I appreciate you for speaking with me. I really hope there is another case that hopefully we can speak about Corey Richards, or another case in the future, because there's so many, especially I'll speak for this case. Like when things like this pop up, when it comes to DV and when it comes to like these difficult conversations of false accusation, etc., we have to sit down and talk. We just, if that comes up, we just have to. Like so, uh, Pinky promised he would. I'm joking. But yeah, hopefully
Well, it's
I'll
always a
we're gonna
pleasure
see you
to
again.
be
So
here. And
sorry, go on.
anytime you have something that you're interested in, feel free to shoot it my way, and I'll see if I'm interested in it also.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. I will definitely do that. Random girl says, "What burger spicy ketchup?" Um, yes, that is me. Wing says it's a crazy case. Yes, that it is, and I mean, I do think that justice was served on some level. I really do think. I mean, there's not evidence to support it. I mean, it's corroborative evidence. There's circumstantial evidence that she may have had the motive to get full custody, but it's still not concrete. So, was justice done in this case? I personally think so. I think that she was bitter about him some way or the other. But I don't think just because you're bitter about somebody, you deserve to kill him. I think you have to be in some kind of danger to, you know, that there's a reason why Andrea said that even the insanity plea is so limited, because it really could be as easy as walking up to a court and be like, well, I killed him because I saw him as a horse. No. I saw him as a horse and the horse was coming at me and it looked evil. Nope. Evil. You know what good and evil is. You are not being insane. You just, things like, I think that's needed. And I think these cases like this is a good reminder that, especially with Ashley, and I think it's very important. And I want people to take away from this case, because this is what I took away. She got away for 3 years, a long period of time. And I'm not gonna make any excuses for lack of DV from Doug. I don't care whether he commits DV for like 3 years or not 3 years, but she did get away and she got herself back into that. The main takeaway is, at least if you were in this situation and you were in that, take precautions. You know, if Doug was coming over to like load the car and there's an history with him, why not have the mother there with her? Or another adult with her with Doug. That's my takeaway from all this. I didn't think that day needed to happen. Because if she was in real genuine danger, then I think that those steps would have been prudent to take away from this case. It would have been prudent to take at the time as well. But that's my only takeaway, that I think that it may have been avoided if there was a third party there. But that's just my takeaway. That's just my final thoughts. What's yours, Andrea? Like, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with what you said. For me, the important thing is really for folks, if you are seeing red flags in your relationship, take them seriously. Don't wait for it to escalate to the point that you have to potentially make decisions like this. It's these are complicated and complex and very difficult situations. There's a massive amount of ambivalence that people in these relationships experience. I would just encourage people to recognize that abuse rarely just fades away or goes away. If you're spotting red flags, the likelihood is that the situation is going to get worse. So, like Doc is just saying, if there are concerns like that about your relationship, please take them seriously. Please put your safety first. Please look out for yourself first. Please do what you need to do to make sure that, yes, you're not alone with this person. You're not inadvertently or intentionally getting into a situation where things can go very badly. So domestic violence, it's been a problem for probably as long as there have been human beings. That's not going to change. It's going to continue to be a situation. So I just encourage everybody to take it very seriously. Look for those warning signs. Don't make excuses. Don't make excuses. That's part of how the cycle works, part of how the pattern works. So, you know, reach out for the support that is there.
Right.
That's my
Well,
takeaway.
well said, Andrea. Thank you so much for saying that. And we're just going to close up there. Beth and Shani says, yes, that helps. Thank you, Andrea. And that's in regards to your question. Says, and thanks, Dr. Hines, for having this discussion. I appreciate everyone, and I hope that you guys did have to take a lot away from this discussion. I plan to do live interviews now. I think I'm not done with editing. I just rather just edit the Ketchup Man videos and just single videos. I'm done with editing interviews. I'm done. It's so much easier doing live. It's so much easier doing lives. But yeah,
If I say something dumb, that's on me.
Well, Steve always says that, you know, everything I say I do is equally embarrassing. So, and ever since I've so it's the same either way. And ever since he said that, I've just internalized that and kind of embracing that now. That it's just embarrassing. If I'm gonna embarrass myself on live and I'm gonna have nerves, so be it. I'm gonna embarrass myself on live.
Go all in. Go
You know
big or
what
go
I mean?
home.
No need for the nerves. Thank you, Publicly Buzzed. He says, great show. Zach says, Andrea, thumbs up. Anyway, we'll close out there. We'll leave it there. Have a wonderful week, Andrea. Have a wonderful week, chat. Yeah, and make sure you watch the community post because I will be communicating with a lot of you guys, and I'm sharing a lot of the work that I have coming out in the coming few days. The current read video that I've been working on is currently, I'm gonna shoot it sometime this week. I haven't put a day on it, but it should be out next week. I will be quick with it because the work is pretty much done. It's scripted. I just need to shoot, and I'm so excited to release that to you, to all of you. But yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I will close out here. Take care of yourself and have a great evening. Bye bye.